Well, Australian academic Kylie Moore-Gilbert has recounted her tale of being detained for 804 days in an Iranian prison under suspicion of spy charges, and she set all of that out in her new book, which is called The Uncaged Sky. And Kylie Moore-Gilbert joins us live now. Kylie, thank you for your time this morning. Can I ask how you're doing?
Thanks so much for having me, Pete. I'm actually doing really well. It was a good experience for me to write this book. Initially, I was a little concerned that working through some of those memories might be difficult for me, but actually it was a cathartic experience, and I'm in a good place.
So recounting all of your experiences, it sort of helped cleanse some of those more traumatic experiences in a strange way?
Yes, maybe not cleanse, but it helped me process through them and I guess order them in my mind and come to terms with them as well. So, whilst I recount some very difficult, painful times whilst being in prison in Iran, I also recount a lot of hilarity and comedy and positivity and hope as well, or at least that was my intention. And writing all of those memories down and ordering them and structuring them into a book format actually helped me process and make sense of them in a way.
How many moments of hilarity did you have while you were stuck inside a cell? I can't imagine that there would have been that many.
Well, it depends on the period of time we're talking about. Certainly when I was in solitary confinement alone, there wasn't much hilarity unless I'm laughing at myself for being, completely bonkers and bouncing off the walls. And, there was a little bit of detachment there, or, I was, thinking, gosh, Kylie, you really are a crazy lady now. But when I had cellmates, and two of my amazing cellmates, Niloufar Bayani and Sapita Kashani, I actually dedicate the book to them. We had fun together. We created our own little world, our own little bubble within all of that cruelty and brutality of prison life, where we supported each other and we did activities together. We made plans together. We played games together. We read books together. We even taught each other, gave little lectures about our various subject areas. And we tried our best to draw on the black comedic humor of prison life and actually have as much fun as we could. So during that period, which was about 9 months that I lived with them in one cell, it was actually at times quite fun.
What was conversely, what was the lowest point, Kylie? And for our viewers, can you describe those conditions that you were in that lowest point?
Yeah, look, I was in solitary confinement all up for 12 months. And the longest stretch I spent was 7 months in a row of solitary. And that is just hell. I can't even, describe how difficult it was. It's classified as a form of torture by the United Nations if for a prolonged period. It is psychological torture. You become your own worst enemy. There's no need for somebody else to torture you because you're torturing yourself, your mind, your brain, controlling the activeness of your thought processes, trying to suppress your very personality, your character, who you are as a unique individual and human being in order to survive that. It's such a challenge because you really just go insane in there. 23 hours a day in a cell, complete sensory deprivation, no natural light, no windows, absolutely nothing to do but be left to rattle around inside your own head. It really is just torturous.
And how were you? I'm sure you weren't able to take notes when you were in prison. How were you able to write a book about it? How did you remember everything?
That's a really good question. I spend a lot of time thinking about the power of my own mind and memory because I guess I discovered skills I didn't know I had in prison. And one of them was memorization. I memorized a vast amount of textual information and conversations, dates, meetings, people's names, I guess as a mental exercise when I was in solitary. But it actually really came in handy for writing the book because I remembered a lot of the detail of many of the conversations and meetings and interactions I'd had with my captors, because I'd worked so hard on my memorization skills while I was in military. But yeah, it's an intense experience, and obviously you remember it.
And just finally here, the book release coincides with another Australian who is in detention, Chang Lei. She's in detention in China. They're obviously different regimes, but there are also obvious similarities. What can you say about how she might be going at the moment without knowing for sure? And what kind of words of encouragement could you give her if she was listening?
Gosh, I'm devastated by the situation of Chang Lei and of several other Australians. We have an Iraqi man, Robert Pether, an Australian man in Iraq. We have Sean Turnell in Myanmar. There's several Australians arbitrarily detained abroad right now. And I really feel for her today, going on trial in a regime like China. I think it'll be just as much of a kangaroo court and just as much of a sham as my own trial was. And that's terrifying. And in a way, getting somebody out of China is even more difficult than getting somebody out of Iran, especially because she's a dual national. They see her as their citizen, their responsibility, and they don't want any Australian interference as they would see it in her case. But I think the whole thing is very clearly arbitrary detention. She's a political hostage. And I hope and I know that probably the Australian government is doing everything it can to make representations on her behalf and try to secure some semblance of a fair trial, although I'm very much sceptical as to whether she'd receive that today.
The quiet diplomacy, you were quite critical of that approach in your case. Would you be critical of that again in this instance, or is it different?
It is different. China is obviously a much more powerful regime than Iran and much more sensitive to criticism in the media and, you know, diplomatically probably as well. Australia's relationship with China is not great right now as well. Although I don't really know whether it would harm her, whether media coverage and a more public diplomatic process would harm her. Although I probably don't know enough about the Chinese context. I certainly plan on using my voice to speak up in her favour.
Okay, that's Kylie Moore-Gilbert speaking to us this morning. She is the academic and author of her book, The Uncaged Sky. Look forward to reading that, Kylie. Thanks for joining us this morning.